हेलो फ्रेंड्स, केजी क्लासेस में आपका स्वागत है। आज हम आपको लॉन्ग क्वेश्चन आंसर अल्फ्रेड लॉर्ड टेनिसन 1809 टू 1892। क्वेश्चन फर्स्ट, राइट ए नोट ऑन द क्रिटिकल एप्रिसिएशन ऑफ द पोएम ब्रिक ब्रिक ब्रिक। आंसर फर्स्ट है इंट्रोडक्शन। This beautiful lyric was first published in 1842, 9 years after the death of Arthur Henry Hallam, Tennyson's dearest friend, whom the poet mourns in memoriam. In memoriam is more a poem of on life, human hopes and fears rushed by death. But Brick 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 is a real poem of lament or a funeral song. The intensity of feeling and of personal loss is nowhere so poignantly expressed as in this perfect lyric. In the 1842 volume, this poem is considered as the most thoughtful and perfect of Tennyson's songs. The poem was actually composed by Tennyson walking at night in the lawns near Somersby, though in the poem he imagines himself sitting on Hallam's grave and surveying the scene around. Brick 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 is a song of grief and longing composed in the background of nature. This song is said to have been written in a fit of sorrow caused by the sad memory of the death of his friend and the sad memory of his untimely death haunted him for years. Therefore, it is an elegiac song pouring forth from the heart of the poet, having a development of thoughts. The poet sees the sea striking against the cliff churchyard where his friend Hallam lies buried. The poet would fain express the sorrow that fills his heart. He notices the fisherman's boy playing with his sister. He also hears the sailor's lad singing in his boat. The poet also notices ships sailing majestically to their ports. Seeing all these, the poet becomes conscious of a great loss which he has sustained by the death of his friend who is gone forever and whose voice has been silenced forever. The poet finally remembers the happy days of his friend's company and feels sorry that those blessed moments will return no more. Having a background of nature. The song has been conceived in the background of nature. In his mood of sorrow and dejection, the poet watched the waves of the ocean dashing fiercely against the shore. The sight stirred the feeling of grief, slumbering in the heart of the poet. The poet contrasts his limited powers with the unbounded powers and freedom of nature. The poet felt that the ocean was expressed his anger, though foaming waves. He felt sorry because he felt the inanimate ocean could express his feelings better than the poet himself. In the next breath, the poet compares himself with fishermen's children playing with their sisters and the sailors' lad playing their boats. They could better express their feelings of delight by shouting freely or singing melodiously. The poet feels sorry because he lacks words and cannot fully express the deep-rooted grief of his heart caused by the sad demise of his dear friend. Heading: a philosophical poem. The poem is not a simple mourning song. In the last two stanzas, the poet enters into a sort of philosophical meditation. He draws a contrast between man and his institutions and nature and phenomena. Human life is mortal and nature is immortal. Man and his institutions are transitory, but nature and her phenomena are fixed and permanent. The phenomena of nature can change but do not die. Man and his creation are for death's taking. Nature repeats itself, but human joy once departed never returns. Ships go on their long voyage and return and find shelter under the hill in the harbor. But the barge of human soil, having once this left this shore of human life, never returns. The dead never returns from the country of the dead. How the poet longs to get one more opportunity to enjoy the company of his departed friends, or at least to listen to his words once more. What it is: a vain longing, a hope against hope, and aspiration foredoomed to disappointment. The tender grace of a day that is dead will never come back to me. Adding a note of sadness. The song has a heart-touching elegiac spirit and tone. The melody or the poem is sweet and elegiac. The atmosphere of the poem resembles that of a lonely healthy on the seashore. The fresh cold grey stones is suggestive of the fact that the shore is replete with many stones lying undisturbed for ages. They have not been trodden by human feet. This lonely atmosphere well suits the spirit of the elegiac song. There is a halting melody in the lines: "Break, break, break at the foot of thy crest, O sea." Heading: a meter and style. The perfection of the song is also due to his masterful handling of the meter. There are 3 accents in each line, except in the 11th and 15th. The first line consists of 3 monosyllables, and each one of them bears an accent and takes as much time in reading as the succeeding lines, which are longer. Break, break, break on the cold grey stone, O sea, and I would that my tongue could utter the thoughts that arises in me. The stresses on the 11th and 15th lines are shown below. But oh, for touch of a vanished hand, and what the tender grace of the day that is dead. The rhythm in the poem is anapestic. Tennyson's anapaests are very slow. Though there is a lack of imagery, the poem is remarkable as a piece of the poet's power of observation. Question 2. Write a note on critical appreciation of the poem Ulysses. Heading: Introduction. Ulysses is a dramatic monologue. In the poem Ulysses, the Greek hero expresses his ideas and thoughts about life, which are largely the poet's own. The poems are actually born out of an inner urge of the poet's heart. It expresses an inner urge for action, for life, and for achievement of greater knowledge. It is the voice of a resurgent soul of 19th century science, of the Renaissance, of all quest and adventure, indeed of the eternal longing in the heart of man to seek a newer world. Heading as a dramatic monologue. Ulysses is written in the form of dramatic monologue, which Tennyson and Browning employed with great skill. It is the device by which an imagined character, historical or legendary, is made to think aloud, to speak out his thoughts and feelings generated by a particular situation in which he is placed. In it analyzes the motives shaping the deeds and destinies of individual characters. It is dramatic in the sense of objective presentation of emotional and intellectual types of humanity. And since there is only one character in the poem, it is lyrical in expression, which could be made truly dramatic only when other types are brought into conflict with it. This, however, does not happen in these poems because the object is to clarify intentions rather than to show characters in conflict. In these dramatic monologue or dramatic lyrics, there is a strange combination of the personal and the impersonal expression of thoughts and feelings. Heading evolution of thoughts. Ulysses is an expression of the longing and aspiration of Ulysses, the king of Ithaca. Ulysses has taken part in the Trojan War, and after the war was over, he had come to rule over his people. He felt completely dissatisfied with the work of ruling over the barbarous and uncivilized people, and he felt the urge and the desire to move out and explore new lands and undertake new adventures. Having a philosophy in the poem. Through Ulysses, the poet expresses the universal philosophy of optimism, courage, activity, and brave adventures. The poet tells us that experience is an arch which opens before us the untraveled world. We should ever be ready to move towards the untraveled world whose margin may fade forever and forever. It is dull to pause and to make an end of life. Life piled on life is insufficient for achievement of many, and therefore whatever remains in man's life before death should be utilized for the achievement of new things. Every hour that he has been saved from the eternal silence should be a bringer of new things. It is wild to rust and not to follow knowledge beyond the utmost bound of human thoughts. Though a man may feel in old age the loss of physical activity, yet determination and strength of will should not be lost. Time may make person weak in body, but time cannot crush the strength and spirit of the soul and the willpower of man. Hence the poet says that like Ulysses and his mariners, we should always be ready to strive, to seek, to find, not to yield. Adding a characterization in the poem. The poem is also remarkable from the point of view of characterization. It presents an interesting character study. Here is an interesting and impressive character of Ulysses and his companions. Ulysses and his mariners had been bold and brave. They had taken part in the Trojan War and had fought on the windy plains of Troy with vigor and strength. Ulysses was known as a brave warrior, and wherever he went he was honored and respected by the pupil. He had seen much of his life and had known different types of people in the eventual career. And as an adventurer, even in his old age, he fought to have ruled over his people in a spirit and atmosphere of peace and quietness. Ulysses was not prepared to rule idly and waste his life. He had the desire to move out for new lands and make his mark before death. Such was the spirit of this man. He represents the brave heroes of the past who, even in their old age, had the courage and strength to undertake new travels and move out to new lands. The willpower of Ulysses and his mariners was very strong, and he had the spirit of strong determination. This spirit in his mariners and himself is very well expressed in the concluding lines of the poems. We are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are one equal temper of heroic heights, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to wield. The character of Telemachus, the son of Ulysses, and Penelope, his wife, is also very nicely drawn. Ulysses points out that his son Telemachus is blameless. He is very conscious, conscientious and performs his duties well. He is tender and kind and respect the household gods. The picture of Telemachus shows that he has got qualities worthy to rule over the people. It having its Greek atmosphere. The poem is full of Greek atmosphere. It is marked with Greek sea life. There are references of mariners, the enchanted sea, the swirling waves, the sounding ocean, the western stars, etc. All these things help to recreate the sea life of ancient Greece. It appears that the poem is connected with the race of the people who had great love for the sea and were fond of undertaking new voyages and exploring new lands. The poem has the Greek atmosphere about it and brings before us the days when Ulysses lived and fought in the Trojan War. The condition of the island of Ithaca is also nicely presented, and we know that the people of this land were still uncultured and barbarous and spent their time in material comfort of life. We also know that the Greek people had respect for their household gods. The poem brings us in touch with the Greek life and the Greek heroes such as Ulysses and Achilles, having its pictorial beauty. This poem is also remarkable for its picturesqueness, which is a hallmark of his poetry in general. This poem contains some very beautiful pen pictures which Tennyson alone could have given. Mark, for instance, for on the ringing plain of windy Troy, the scene dances before our mental eyes with all its vividness and gusto. A leisure artist might have failed to produce the same effect in even a dozen lines, but Tennyson succeeded in one stroke only. The lines, the long day bends, the slow moon climbs, the deep moans round with many voices, may be noted for their picturesque beauty, having a meter and style. Ulysses is written in blank verse, the same verse which Shakespeare used in his plays and Milton in his Paradise Lost. It is suited to the dignity's expression of character. There is gravity and weight in the rhythm, which is slow and solemn in its movement. Tennyson is surely artistic in making those verse paragraphs which are the glories of Milton's blank verse. Though short, the poem show Tennyson's mastery over this epic as well as dramatic meter of English verse. Each line has 5 feet each foot, 2 syllables of which the second is stressed, heading as a contrast to the lotus eaters. Ulysses presents a fine contrast to the lotus eaters. In this poem, Tennyson advocates the philosophy of action and determination. Ulysses is quite enthusiastic and is ready to explore newer lands and acquire more knowledge. He boldly declares, "Old age has yet his honor and it's his toil. Death closes all but something ere the end. Some work of noble notes may yet be done, not unbecoming man that strive with gods." But in the lotus eater, the philosophy presented is that of pessimism and inertia. The sailors are full of despondency. They want to rest forever. How sweet it were having the downward stream with half shut eyes ever to seem falling asleep in a half dream. Question है, write a note on Tennyson as a represented poet of the Victorian age. Heading A, introduction. Tennyson is as much as represented poet of the Victorian age as Chaucer was the 14th century and Pope of the 18th century England. Tennyson's poetry reflects the true spirit of the age. It may be noted that he is not a mere follower but an interpreter of the age. There is nothing prophetic about his writings. His truly representative character made him universally popular in his own age. It is this sensitiveness to his surroundings, to the shifting currents of thoughts and feelings of his generation, which made him an exceptionally popular poet. Let us see the various characteristics of the age as reflected in the poetical works of Tennyson. Heading a democratic note. Victorian age was an age of democratic spirit. Common people were fighting for their equal rights and political freedom. Tennyson himself belonged to the upper middle class and could not transcend the limitation of his class. This attitude towards the common man was that of the cultured aristocratic outsider. In the Lord of Verlaine, he supports the claim of the landed democracy. However, in the Princess, he deals with the question of emancipation of women. According to Tennyson, men for the field and women for the hearth, men for the sword and for the needle see, men with the head and women with the heart, men to command and women to obey. All these confusions had a claims of science and religion, the Victorian compromise. On the other major features of the age of Tennyson was the rise of scientific spirit. Tennyson's attitude towards scientific progress was skeptical. Sometimes he spoke of science with impatience, sometimes he shrank back in dismay before the immensities of science. In fact, Tennyson swung between the two extremes of science and religion. Life seemed to him a movement between two eternities. In Memoriam, he said, "But what am I? An infant crying in the night, an infant crying for the light, and with no language but a cry." The struggle between scientific outlook and religious faith made the message more and more skeptical In such a situation, Tennyson sought to preach a compromise. This compromise was the needed of the hour. Having a didactic spirit, the Victorian author and the poet played the role of moral teacher. Generally speaking, the Victorian had a keen fascination for moralizing and preaching. Tennyson understood pupils' expectation, and thus he played to admiration the role of poet-philosopher. Having a love and marriage, the Victorian believed in conjugal love rather than romantic. Tennyson supported this view most devotedly. He could not allow passion in love. Any relation between man and women other than the married one was not sanctioned by him. As Campton Ricketts observes, Tennyson elected to treat of love not with Byron as an eternal force, or with Shelley and Browning as a transcendental passion, or with Rossetti as a mystic mingling of sense and spirit, but as a democratic sentiment. The Miller's Daughter is a simple story of true sweethearting and married love, but raised into a steady and grave emotion worthy of a love built to last for life betwixt a man and woman. Having a patriotism, the Victorians were intensely patriotic. They took pride in their queen and national glories. Tennyson shared these feelings of his countrymen in his poetry. The sense of national pride and glory is well sounded. He represents English life and manners with utmost sincerity. The northern farmer is the true picture of Lincolnshire peasant, and northern cobbler and village wife are all national portraits depicting the rustic life of England. Tennyson's patriotism is narrow and insular. His praise for his own country is the expression of a Victorian patriot who considered his country superior to all other countries of the world. He says, "There is no land like England, where's the light of Davy. There are no hearts like English heart, such hearts of oak as they be." Heading a conclusion, Tennyson presents in his poetry all the essential features of Victorian life, the ideas and tastes, the inherited predilections belonging to each class and generation, moderation in politics, refined culture, religious liberalism, checked by doubt, a lively interest in the advance of scientific discovery, coupled with alarm lest it should lead us astray, attachment to ancient institutions, larger view of duty of state towards its people, and increasing sympathy with poverty and distress. All these Victorian feelings find expression in Tennyson's poem. Thanks, best of luck.